If you're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, or carrying more than you can put into words, I've created something just for moments like that. Go to hopeforthecaregiver.com. Right at the top of the page, click the blinking Caregiver 911 light. That page will take you to a short guided audio I made to give caregivers a quiet place to pause, breathe, and set the load down. You don't have to fix anything. You're allowed to rest here. hopeforthecaregiver.com and click on Caregiver 911. Welcome to Hope for the Caregiver. This is Peter Rosenberger. Glad to be with you. This is the program for you as a family caregiver. More than 65 million Americans right now serve as a family caregiver, putting themselves knowingly, voluntarily, and sometimes exasperatingly between someone with a chronic impairment and even worse, disaster. How do you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not? And this program is designed to equip, encourage, strengthen the family caregiver. And I have maintained a long time that, and I don't know this from personal experience, even though I have a lengthy journey as a caregiver, I haven't done this, which is what is the residual impact on a caregiver after the caregiving has ended? And I've maintained that caregiving doesn't stop in a cemetery. The effect of a caregiver can last way beyond. And my next guest is still processing some of that, and I want you to hear her story. This is Malena Cunningham, and she is we're both originally from South Carolina. We found that out, so we didn't even have to use subtitles or nothing to be able to understand each other. But she lives in Birmingham. Well, now you're in Atlanta, but she was in Birmingham for years doing the news down there, and she's an Emmy Award-winning journalist, and now she's got a book out that I think you're going to want to hear her story, and it's titled When Love Lets Go. And it chronicles her taking care of her mother, but there's even more to the story, and she's going to get into that. So, Malena, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for being willing to share this story. There's a lot of vulnerability and a lot of pain in this story, but there's also some great insights that have come your way. So I'm glad you're here. That's a long intro to get to you, but you have a big story and you have a big journey. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Peter, for having me, and thank you so much for having this platform. When I was going through my caregiving journey a couple of years ago, I wasn't even aware these platforms were out here because I was so focused on the caregiving. I wasn't looking that much at what do I need for myself? What should I be doing for myself? I was pouring 110% into taking care of my mom.
Well, that's often the case of what happens with us as caregivers. We lose ourselves in someone else's story, and we think we'll put our life on hold, and then we'll get mom to Jesus or whatever, and then we'll go back and resume our life. But it doesn't always work that way. And life happens while we're caregiving. And I've realized that over the years that at some point you can't put everything on hold. You know, people used to say it in churches and so forth, they want to bring meals and so forth, and that's great. But with caregiving like this, you can only bring so many meals before somebody's got to learn how to cook. And that's the journey you found yourself in, because it kind of hit you from actually a couple different sides. Bring us up to speed. Tell us your story. Take us back into where this started with you, because this was not on your list of things to do.
Absolutely not.
And to get into. You did not think you would be having this conversation on a caregiver show.
Absolutely not. I am the youngest of three children born in South Carolina. And as you mentioned, my background.
Isn't that special, by the way? We're both born in South Carolina.
Born in South Carolina.
Carolina bred. When we die, we'll be Carolina dead. So
we will be. But in my career as a television news anchor and reporter, which I was in that business for 23 years, I moved around a lot, and I didn't get married until I was much older. And my sister stayed, as a matter of fact, in Anderson, South Carolina. She was married, 3 kids. So it was just assumed that she would be the caregiver of our parents. My father passed away about 15 years ago. He died of cancer. My sister was there a lot for that. But even before my parents got elderly and were having issues, I sat them down when they were in their 70s and in their right mind, and I said, What will life look like for you in your 80s if God blesses you to live a long life? Let's start talking about, do you want to stay in your home? Do you want to come live with me? Do you want to go to assisted living? So I got my parents thinking about putting together a plan, which, as you know, in a lot of families, particularly in African American families, having a conversation is so hard, but it's necessary. Um, my
Well, let
sister,
me ask you a question.
unfortunately,
What do you think
mhm.
makes it in African American families? What do you think makes that a little more nuanced or different? What is the difference on that when it's
That's
such
a
a hard
very
conversation?
good that's a good question, Peter, and I honestly don't know the answer. I just know that it's prevalent. It was always in my parents' generation, and of course their parents' generation, that the elderly, and keep in mind, a lot of folks didn't live to be 60 and 70 years old. They died young. So long life, if someone was blessed to live over the age of 65, then you had to think about, where does grandma, auntie, uncle go? And usually it was with a family member, because a lot of folks didn't have resources. And the tradition was you just took care of family at home. You didn't send your family member to a nursing facility. But you have to think about it. Some people don't have children. I'm in that boat. I don't have children. So I have to think about, and I have since me provision, what happens to me should I live to be in my 80s? But yeah, in the African American family, I think because the tradition was, you just, someone in the family just stepped up. It was just understood, and that was it.
Grandma's going to come live with us.
Grandma's gonna come live with somebody. Well, think about my generation, those of us who were able to go off to college, have careers, move away from Anderson, South Carolina, Lawrence, South Carolina, and the towns that we grew up in. Then you're not there physically with family members to be able to take care of them. So that is an issue as well. I think a lot of things also revolve around, unfortunately, finances. Who gets what in the family? As you know, that's a big fight as parents get older and pass away. Who gets what, especially if the parents haven't made provisions and done a will to make sure needs are met, and resources are dispersed.
Mm. And I've got a friend of mine who's a missionary in Tonga, and in the Kingdom of Tonga over in the South, wherever Tonga is. I think it's out in the Pacific, way out there on the other side of the world. And she talks about that, and that's I remember, and they used some of my stuff because they had so many multi-generational family units,
Hmm.
and we've gotten away from that here in our country,
Yes, you
and
have.
because we have access to assisted living and things like that, but we this wasn't the way it always was, and
Mm-mm.
it was just and families are so spread out,
Exactly.
and so when your father passed away, you stepped in with your mother. Now your mother was a retired teacher,
Yes.
and she was not exactly a wallflower. She was opinionated, strong, and you know she had her own thing going on. How was that when those roles kind of changed a little bit? Because you're a strong personality. I mean, you're a professional woman, but your mother was a professional woman, and she wasn't going to just roll over here. She was.
Well, after my father passed away, my mom was still in her 70s, so she was still very viable. She was still traveling. She still had her social life. But I started to see her slowing down when she turned, I guess, about 82. And I think my mother was 83 when my sister passed away, 82 or 83. And not being a parent, I don't know what that heartbreak feels like, but I saw it in my mother, to see her bury a child. And she changed a little bit after that. I was in Pennsylvania at the time, and I was married at the time, and my husband and I decided to move to Atlanta to be closer to my mom in South Carolina, because I could see now that my sister was gone, she was a year older than me. We knew she would be the caregiver of my mom, but then when she passed away of breast cancer, the role automatically fell to me, and I wanted to be closer to my mom. I think when that happened, Peter, my mother began to look at life differently. her physical ailments began to really crop up, and she was grateful that I was, even though she was a strong-willed woman, that I was strong as well and wouldn't be a wallflower, and I could step in and she could trust me to take care of everything that needed to be taken care of and take care of her.
Let me ask you a question. What surprised you about you stepping into that role?
Oh, that's a good question. I
See, now you
think
know how all the people you interviewed over the years felt when you would ask them a good
exactly.
question.
Yeah. It's almost like I went into news anchor reporter mode because role because keep in mind when there's breaking news, something happens in the newsroom. You're not prepared for whatever the event is, but you are prepared for the process. We know A, B, C, D, and E has to happen before this story gets on the air. And I, as a news anchor, can't come on the air. Oh my God, this has happened. Because I would scare the world to death. I had to learn how to be calm in the face of crisis and then mentally in my mind think we done A. We can't do B until we've done A. Now that we've done A, we can do B. Now we can do the C, and go down the line.
I love
And
that phrase you
that
just said. You're not prepared for what's happened, but you're prepared for the process. And
Mhm.
I really that is a wonderful concept to bring to caregiving. So I'm sorry to interrupt all that, but that is
No, that's
really
okay.
something special there, Malena. I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna probably just go ahead and just steal that one, Malena. I'm
That's
just gonna
right. All
you just
right.
witnessed grand larceny right here in an interview. So
You're
because
from
that is
South
a
Carolina. I'll let you borrow it.
but that's it. I mean, I could just see you, because I think about all the breaking news, the things that have happened, and then you have to look at the camera and you have to say, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to
Hmm.
get there. Here's what's going on, and that's a powerful moment that
And
you
and
brought that
not
kind of
panic
training into
doing it.
caregiving.
Hmm. And it worked because I'm dealing with taking my mom to different doctor's appointments, dialysis, hearing bad news. When my mother had complete kidney failure, an aneurysm, aortic aneurysm in her stomach, and pneumonia all at the same time, the doctors just basically said, and that was once I moved to Atlanta and before she moved in with me, the doctors basically said, just get prepared to bury your mother. And of course, hearing that as a child was hard, but then my news anchor brain went into no, when that day comes, it will. But in the meantime, what's the A, B, C, D, and E we should be doing? How should I be handling this? Blah, blah, blah. And even at the hospital, the nurses were teasing me. They said, who are you? Because the way you handle these doctors and the way you just take charge. And I had to laugh and I said, oops, that's just part of my training. And it served me well because it's so overwhelming that, and as you know, Peter, being a caregiver, when you hear all of this bad medical news, you just want to break out and cry because I'm thinking, this is my mom. My gosh. And all of a sudden I realized the roles have reversed. She cared for me in the early days of my life. I'm grateful for how my life turned out. And now I don't look at this as an obligation. I look at this as an honor and a privilege to be able to give back and be in a position where I could give my mother the love and care that she needed. And she recognized I knew how to take charge, ask questions, do things, make the best things happen that could happen. And I had a faith. We had a faith. We were trusting and believing in God to get us through this.
The news anchor part of you certainly stepped up and did all these things, but there's a point where even news anchors have to go off somewhere quiet and deal with the grief of what's going on in their life. How did that work out for you? Was there someone there be able to help you? Because in the process of all this, your husband got sick, and so how did you where did you go for that? What did that look like for you to be able to go into those quiet places and just deal with this and compose yourself?
I think for me, Peter, it was I had to exercise, walk back into nature. Here's the challenge of being professional and a strong woman and a strong Black woman, you just think you're always okay. They see you maybe dealing with a bad situation, but because I don't break down and I am an in charge person, they just assume, well, she's okay because things are moving along. They don't see me crying. They don't see me breaking. I don't go running to them. So people just, they may call and ask, but then they don't always follow through. And sometimes they don't even call and ask. And I had to just say, okay, God, it's me and you. You got this. You got me. I'm trusting and believing you for this. Help me to be strong with this because I said, I don't even know what's going on in other people's lives. So I don't expect everybody to drop everything. Another thing in my situation, Peter, I am the young child of the youngest child. So my first cousins on my dad's side, they literally could be my parents. They are, 20 years older than me. And so I didn't have first cousins on my father's side that could step in and help me because they weren't my age. They didn't live around me either. And then you mentioned my husband got sick. I'll never forget it. January the 2nd, 2024, my husband helped me get my mom in the car to take her to dialysis. Normally, I would take her to dialysis and come back home and do things until it was time to pick her up 3 or 4 hours later. But of course, it was January the 2nd, the new year. I had on my exercise clothes. I said, okay, going to the gym. It's the New Year's resolutions. So I took her to dialysis. My gym wasn't far from where she went to dialysis. And right next door to my gym, I decided, oh, let me get my nails done too. So this was me time for Malena while my mother was doing dialysis. A friend of mine texted me to remind me we had a 12 o'clock lunch date, an actor friend. And I went, oh my goodness, let me rush home, change clothes, and I'll have my husband pick my mother up. When I get home, my husband is upstairs and I'm rushing around and I see him, but I'm not paying attention because I'm trying to get ready. And I said, I need you to go pick up mother. I'm going to lunch, blah, blah. And he just said, yeah, yeah, which that wasn't how my husband talked. And I went, are you okay? And he just looked at me and yeah, yeah. But I could see something wasn't right about him. I called 911. My husband had had a stroke. I don't know how long it had been, but I came home and found him and he had had a stroke. He was standing upright, but it was obvious something was wrong. So ambulance came. He's in the hospital. He's in intensive care. I had someone pick up my mom, and then my mother had been in assisted living, but we brought her back home with us in November. So 2 months later, my husband, less than 2 months later, he has the stroke. I have to put my mom back in assisted living because I can't handle her and my husband having a stroke. He's in ICU, then he goes to rehab. So by now, I'm like 10 alarm fire 24/7 thinking, my mom is declining. Don't know if my husband's going to live. You talk about the crazy woman. And I felt like the plans I had fell apart because nowhere on the list of taking care of my mother was there. Oh, and by the way, your husband's going to have a stroke. So now I'm a caregiver for two people.
My a longtime friend of mine and was my pastor for many years. He said to me once. He said, "Peter, you do yourself a disservice." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You make what you carry look easier than it is, and people have
Yes.
no idea what you deal with
Yes.
every day." And I thought about that a long time, and I thought, well, I can't wear this out on my sleeve.
Right.
I can't walk around and just, I thought about writing a new book called Exhausted. Why do you ask? Because when people look at me,
Good title.
but exhausted, why do you ask? But I get that because I look at you and I see the same thing. I see now why he said that to me. Malena, you do yourself a disservice because people have no idea what you carry and you make it look easier than it is. So they don't know what to say because you are strong, because you are composed. And that's training. That is your personality. That is all those things that you mentioned. And yet, this is a terrifying moment.
Hmm.
And it's crashing down on you. There's a point for me that I've said to myself, this is really happening. But when I say that out loud to other people, I don't know that they can process that kind of conversation unless they have some
Exactly.
kind of tangible experience in it.
Exactly, Peter. And that's what I found with my friends. And some of them even said to me, we saw what you were going through, and it scared us because we are about to be where you are because we see it in our parents, or we see it in a sibling, or we see it in a spouse, or we see it in someone. And that's something we're never taught, Peter, or at least I wasn't growing up, what a caregiver role would be and how exhausting it can be. You don't know what to expect from moment to moment, and you don't realize how it changes you. All you know is you're on 24/7 and you've got to do what you got to do.
I when I set out to do this years ago, I set out to create a place where we could talk about things that I wish somebody had said to me because
Mhm.
nobody really knew what to say to me. I would imagine people like you just said, many of your friends didn't know what to say to you. They
That's
don't know
right.
how to speak. They well, let me know if there's something you need. Well,
Hmm.
now I got to think of something for you to do. Work up the courage to
Exactly.
ask you to do it and
Exactly.
hope you'll follow through with it and then hope you won't mess it up so bad that I got to clean it up.
Exactly.
And that's the reality for so many of us as caregivers. And you were in this place. This situation with your husband did not, well, with both your husband and your mother, it it just it took you down a pretty rough path. Talk about that a little bit.
Rough path and quickly because again, I'm juggling. Is my husband going to die? I got to fight to keep him alive. But my mom is dying. I'm not fighting to keep her alive because she made the decision. She's ready. And I'd spoken with her pastor. He said to me, you know, your mom is almost 91 years old. She's lived a good life. Don't try to keep her here because she will try to stay as long as you keep her here. And then I'm like, but I love my mom. I don't want to lose my mom. I think, my husband, I didn't know what to do. And I just went for a walk and I cried. I said, God, your will be done. Just help me to get through what I need to get through in this process. Whatever you do, don't let me lose my mind and don't let me die first. Because if I die, who's going to take care? you know.
That
And
that
I
that
said,
keeps
that's a
me awake at
crazy,
night.
yeah. And I said, that was a crazy prayer to have. But all I kept saying was, just don't let me die in all of this. I'm driving to the hospital. Atlanta, traffic is horrible. And sometimes I'll say, how did I get here? Did I run a red light? I don't even, did I make, I didn't even know how I was moving, but I was getting to where I needed to get. But all I kept saying was just don't let me die and just let me keep my mind. I know I'll get through all of this.
And you did, but not without scars. And when you're now when tell us about because the name of the book, and the four words that your mother said, "I'm ready to die." Well, you
Yes.
weren't ready to hear that, but she was ready to say it. And talk about this book and what it meant for you to write this and to share this. It's the book is titled "When Love Lets Go." She was ready to go. She knew that her body was failing, and I've seen this many times with folks. She's ready to go. You weren't, and you were holding on pretty tight. I mean, they were grasping. What changed?
Yes.
What happened? And I love that prayer. Lord, Thy will be done. That's a
Mhm.
hard prayer. A lot of people say, well, we kind of gloss over that sometimes because we've heard it so many times, but it really is not an easy prayer. Jesus wrestled with
No.
it in Gethsemane.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it is anybody that says that's an easy prayer hadn't prayed it uh, in moments like this. And
Exactly.
and so what talk about that process a little bit with you.
So when my mom first came to Atlanta with me and my husband, she was in okay shape, but she started to deteriorate rapidly to the point where I was constantly up in the middle of the night having to rush her to the hospital, calling ambulances, and it was really affecting my health. And I sat down with my mom, my husband, and I said, Mother, I'm not a healthcare professional. It would really be best for me and you both if you're in assisted living because you got 24-hour. I will see you every day. I'll still take you to dialysis. And she agreed because she could see the stress on me. So it was one of those days when in July I was about to pick her up to take her to dialysis. And my mom was dressed and she was sitting in her room waiting for me. And my mother was always we were fun loving people. And she just looked at me very sternly, sitting in that chair. I will never forget her face. And she said, I'm ready to die. And I looked at her like, what? And I said, is this beginning of a joke? And laughed and I said, well, Jesus hadn't told me that he's ready to take you home. So I think you're good. And she didn't crack a smile. You know, we would joke with each other like that. And I knew then, oh my goodness. And she said, you got everything in order. I want you to call the funeral home. I want you to do, she just started listing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is real. And I said, okay, mother, let's get you ready to go to dialysis. We'll talk about this more when you get done with dialysis. But, okay. And so then it was like I knew then the clock was ticking. And luckily, my mother and I had already put some things in place. But to help me with this, Peter, I called my mother's pastor back in South Carolina. And I said, this is the conversation I've had with my mother. I don't know what to do. And he said, Malena, your mother is the last one in her family. She's lived longer than anybody in her family. She's tired. She's hanging on because of you. And she needs to know that you're ready to let her go. And that's where the title of the book came, When Love Lets Go. Because I had to say, okay, mother, I'm giving you back to God. I'm okay with your time here on earth with me, and I can release you because I know you know where you're going, and I know where you're going. It's hard, but I can let you go now.
How'd you take that from your pastor when you heard those words from her pastor? How did how did you respond to that? I mean,
That was what,
feel free. You don't have to answer any of these questions, by the way, Melina, if they're too painful. I don't want to
oh,
do
no,
that.
no.
But that's a beautiful moment of your pastor being a pastor, and say, bringing the very word of God and presence of Scripture's authority into this, of speaking this, because this is going to happen. And how did you handle that?
I think stopped being a journalist and became a daughter at that point because he said to me, you're not the only person I'm counseling right now who's dealing with the same issue. He said, but your mother lived a long life. She's done a lot of great things. Her body is tired. He said, when people are ready to die and they say it, they know. And so we have to give them the grace and the love to let go. And he said, she'll hang on as long as you want her here, or she'll try. But think about the pain she's in and what she's facing and what dialysis has done to her body. And I could see in 2 years a major change in my mother. She got to the point where she couldn't walk well. She was starting to lose her sight. And I thought, oh my God, he's so right. It's almost like cruelty to try to keep her here when her body is giving out and she is ready to go. She never said to me, I'm scared to die, blah, blah, blah. No, she was clear. I'm ready to go.
My father's a pastor, and he took care of so many people. Nobody did that kind of pastoral care. As far as I'm concerned, he set the gold standard for it with people in deathbed situations, and he said basically the same thing to me that your mom's pastor said to you, is that there were so many people that they would, when they knew, and the Apostle Paul was that, I'm poured out like water, he said. They know, and particularly if they walk with the Lord. There's not this, looking into the abyss and wondering what's happening. She knew where she was going. She knew
Exactly.
who she belonged to, and I've often said this to my fellow caregivers. Our goal is to one day for us to stand at a grave. We can't
Mm,
guarantee that we'll be the one standing, but that's our goal. Like you said, Lord,
exactly.
don't let me die. Our goal is to stand there, but not stand there with clenched fist.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
at God, ourselves, at people family that didn't help the way we wanted them to or whatever.
Exactly.
But the goal is to, Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn. But we're not mourning if we're despairing or raging. You can't
Exactly.
mourn with clenched fist. Mourning
Exactly.
means accepting this is what's happened. And it sounds like that steady word, even though it was over the phone, it was like your mom's pastor put his hand on your shoulder and said,
Mm-hmm.
here's the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a heaviness, but it's not a despairing because of the nature of our belief and what Scripture gives us, the promise thereof. And your pastor knew this, and he was able to impart that to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you let her go. You
I
let her
let her
go.
go. And the hardest thing, Peter, a lot of times when people are dealing with, a parent who's, near end of life, you don't know when that day is coming. They're older, they're sick, they pass when they pass. In my case, my mother had to stop doing dialysis. She was ready to stop. At first, we took her down to 2 days a week instead of three. But again, she just didn't want to tolerate it anymore. And so her nephrologist explained to her, her kidney specialist, that Miss Cunningham, when we take you off dialysis, the clock will tick. And he didn't want to go into a lot of details with her, so he had a private conversation with me. He said, your mother will not live another 2 weeks. She's older, she's frail, she's lost weight, and her body, because she can't excrete the fluids, that toxin is going to build up. And so she will be dead within 2 weeks. So to know that, it's like, oh my God, you know, that was another shock to the system. But then again, it kind of prepared me because I knew it wouldn't be a lingering weeks, months, whatever. So that was equally as hard, but also it was like, thank God she won't have to suffer much longer.
Mm.
So I could plan to be with her. So by then my husband was home. He was out of IC, out of rehab. But because he had had a stroke, that's brain damage. So he wasn't really comprehending everything I was dealing with, even though I was explaining. I wasn't getting the empathy and compassion and sympathy from him because his brain couldn't process what I was dealing with my mom dying. So that was difficult too.
There's a writer, Watchman Nee, who wrote a line years ago in a book, the dark night of the soul.
Hmm.
You understand that, don't you?
Mm.
The lonely places, and grief is a lonely place. And um, it's painful to think about how lonely that was for you. And as you process this out, and as you wrote this out, now your mother passed away. Then you turn your attention to your husband and talk about that.
Fortunately, he never really got better. He went through the rehab and everything, and then sadly had a cancer diagnosis. Went through that, and then he passed away in March of this year. So when he passed away, I sat in the house and said, "Oh my God, the two people who were my roommates 2 years ago are gone. I am by myself. I'm not a caregiver. I'm not taking care of it. The people that I love the most aren't here. Who am I now? What do?"
Those are those are questions that every caregiver is going to ask. Who am I now? And I, I I started preparing for that question a long time ago for myself. I've Gracie has gone all the way up to the brink uh, many times, and I was I've watched her gurney go into surgery after surgery after surgery, and so I
Yeah.
thought, okay. And I started realizing that I'm going to have to answer that question: Who
Mhm.
am I apart from this?
Yep.
And my mother came to me a long time ago, and she said, my prayer for you is that you will, because we really thought Gracie was going to die, and It turns out my wife is, tougher than a Waffle House steak. And, and now I'm kind of wondering, is she going to outlive all of us? And I got to figure out what kind of world am I going to leave for Gracie and Keith Richards? But it's, it but she said, I don't want you to be adrift and not have purpose or meaning or whatever in your life. And so I started working on this every bit of, decades ago. Started thinking, okay, I need to have an identity and a life that is ready to continue on in the event this happens. Don't know that it will happen. May not. Jesus could come back next Thursday. I don't know. I have no idea. But I can't put me on hold.
Exactly.
And I've seen caregivers do this. They put themselves on hold. Well, you have a very rich and full life, and I know it took you reeled a little bit because these two people were gone, but you have been immersed in life, and you've been pushing yourself like this. Talk about that a little bit.
So 5 years ago, coming out of COVID, when we were all vaccinated, my husband was working from home because people couldn't go into the office. I was taking my mother back and forth to dialysis. And I think I was more afraid during the COVID time than anything because I was the one that was going to the grocery store. I made sure nobody else was doing things but me. And because I did not want my mother to get COVID on dialysis. I don't know what that would have looked like, and I didn't want to think about it. But coming out of COVID, when we were all vaccinated, I got a random email one day about coming to do background as an actor here in Atlanta. Never thought about being an actor. I wanted to get out of the house. I just need a break. So I answered the email. I got picked to do background. I did background on 2 different shows back to back in 1 week and ended up getting an agent out of that and started getting speaking roles. So here I am being a caregiver to my mom. My husband was still fine at the time. And I'm struggling, learning lines, going to set, all of that is stressful. But it was a way of escape for me as well. And me not even thinking that the acting would take off. I thought it would be something that might happen every now and then. Well, 5 Lifetime movies later, Will Trent, HBO, I've commercials. I was constantly working. I had to put all that on hold, which was fine. Now that Carl and my mom are gone, I'm back to acting and doing other things, which has been a release. But I wrote the book, getting back to something you asked me earlier, and I'm going to show my book when Let's Go. I wrote this book because a year ago I was visiting in Birmingham with a friend of mine, and she had no idea that I was going through all that going through because a lot of people did not know my husband had had a stroke. That wasn't something that I advertised. I didn't put on Facebook. It's like, I'm trying to keep my life here. And we're praying he gets better. Just lost my mom and I'm still dealing with this. So I'm not advertising anything. But she encouraged me to write the book. Every time I tried, Peter, I'd write I just boohoo. I'd just cry because I could see it all over again. I just couldn't get through it. But in February of this year, now I started writing the book in April of last year, but in February of this year, I was cast in a movie where I actually play a mother who has 3 daughters. 2 of them have moved out. One just stayed behind to be my caregiver. She gave up her life to be my caregiver. And in the movie, I die in the very beginning. And the movie is about the daughters have come home. They're planning my funeral. But one stipulation for them to get their inheritance from me is they have to all sit down and write letters I have written them about themselves. I have to read it together. But there's the scene where I actually died. The young lady who plays my caregiver daughter literally was going off script and she was crying for real. I'm lying there trying not to cry because I'm supposed to be dead. And the thing she was saying to me about letting me go was what I said to my mother. And I said, oh my God. And I said, God, how do you keep me from crying in this scene? And he said, Malena, what you're hearing is what your mother heard from you. And that just gave me a peace. And once we wrapped, I came home and I started writing and I couldn't stop, Peter. It was like grief therapy. It just flowed out of me. And I finished the book in about 2 weeks.
Did you ever tell that to the young actress?
I did. As a
How
matter
did
of fact,
she how did she
I
respond to
told it
that?
to the entire crew, including the director. I said, you all had no idea that I just went through this last year. And now I'm reliving this and I'm having to be an actor. I said, talk about art imitating life, imitating art. And I said, this also showed me my strength as a person and my strength as an actor. Because as I've been on with you talking, you've seen how I stirred up remembering things. But I had to calm myself and remind myself, you're acting. You know, this happened to you, but you're acting, but you can't because the dead body can't be crying, to mess up scene. All of this is going through my head. But
But
yeah,
well, what a unique way to process these things, because we all have to. We all got to deal with it. We all got to process it. I do it through music, and but you've got to process this out
hmm
somehow. Otherwise, if you keep this all bottled up, into it'll wreck you.
it will.
And sometimes you just need permission to do it, and it's amazing you got permission to do it on the set. And that really that's quite a story. That's quite a story. As you buried your husband, and now you've buried your mother, your husband. What do you see as you're moving forward now? What's next for you? You going to do a lot more acting, speaking?
I, all of the above. I really feel like now I'm on this caregiver journey, like you are, and part of this caregiver community. Because once you are, you always are. And I wrote the book. What I want caregivers to learn is we all have a story. Yours is may not be exactly my path, but live it, express it, and then go on with your life. One thing my mother said to me, Melina, you still have to live, go on with your life. And when I thought about it, I'm in my 60s and my mother lived to almost 91. I said, if I'm blessed to have longevity like she has, I still have almost 30 years. That's a long time. And I said, what can I do to walk and to have a mission that means something. And I said, being a public figure, having been on television and in movies and television shows, people do recognize me. And I said, I have a platform. And to know that I have gone through what an average, normal person who hasn't had my career path, when they see that I have gone through that, but I'm still living, I think it makes them feel like it's okay for me too. Because if they can survive all of that and keep going, then I should have no excuse. So I'm hoping to be a role model, but I want to be a supporter, an advocate. In my book, not only do I tell my story, but I also have pages for the caregiver to write about their feelings. And I have resources in the back of the book where to get help for A, B, C, D, and E. So it's not just my story, but it's a resource guide. And I'm looking to do book releases, brunches around in different cities. I want to work with churches on their caregiving ministries if they have one. And if they don't, how can they start that? Book clubs, how do you read the book and learn from that? So I've written workbooks and book club guides on how to have discussions around caregiving.
It's stunning as I watch you and I listen to you, and I can see, even just in this small interview, the change with you. You went from praying, Lord, don't let me die, to Lord, let me live. And it's a remarkable difference, isn't it? Because you're not
And since
just
I'm
not dying. And
right,
that's what I think COVID taught us. And during COVID, the whole world was like, we don't want to die. But how many people were saying, no, I want to live? I want to
hmm
live every moment.
hmm
And even in the moment of grief and heartache. And I had to come to that point where I realized, because we kept thinking, okay, we'll get through this surgery and then we'll get on with our life. And there was a point where Gracie and I looked at each other and said, this is our life. And we're going to live it.
mm
If we have to live it, we spent 5 months in the hospital last year. If we have to live 5 months
mm
in the hospital, this is our life. It's not a bad
Yeah.
life. It's a hard life, but it's
Yeah.
not a bad life, but it is life, and it's an exciting life. And I would see that from my fellow caregivers. And people say,
hmm
well, you don't understand how hard it is, Peter. And I'm like, well, yeah, I do. And so I think that we cannot give ourselves an excuse to check out of life. life
Exactly.
is however painful it is, and some of the most meaningful moments that Gracie and I've had
Hmm.
have also been some of the most difficult and painful moments.
Yes,
But at the
yes.
same time, that's where life, that's the texture of life. And so I applaud what you're doing. Last thing before I let you go, because I know you've got other appointments and so forth, but do you, if you could say one thing to the church, to pastors, about this issue of families dealing with this kind of issue that you're talking about, what would that be?
I would say find a way to take the time to ask people to be honest because we get dressed up, we go to church on Sunday, praise the Lord, I'm blessed and highly favored. We're all saying it. But nobody's saying, oh my God, I was up all night because I had to take my mom. We don't want to burden people with our problems. Everybody wants to come to church and be saintly, suppose. And this is what the pastor is saying. If he's not taking the time to step out of the pulpit to say, Malena, what's really going on with you? I can see it in your face. Um, People have to say it's okay to be raw and be honest because if you're not dealing with it, you're going to be dealing with it, or you just came out of dealing with it. That's life, and life goes on. And to be prepared, and to know that people are hurting. No matter what we say, no matter how we try to smile, play it off, or whatever. I want to get back to something else too, Peter. I recognized years ago that the gift and talent that God gave me was the ability to speak and to present. And it carried out in the career path I've had, being a television reporter, news anchor, and actor. And I said once my mother and Carl passed away, I said, God, I can still talk. So speak through me. I'm not afraid to come in front of audiences. I'm used to this. So speak through me. Help me to reach the people who need the help, need what I needed.
It's a wonderful hymn. I love the hymns of the church. Take my life and let it be, Lord, consecrate it to thee. But there's a line that says, take my voice and let it.
Hmm.
And that's what I think Francis Havergal wrote that. And I think that's what comes to mind as you were saying that, that we offer what we have. Take my voice, take my
Hmm.
ability to stand in front of an audience. They say that, I remember the old joke Jerry Seinfeld said, the number one fear in America is public speaking.
Hmm.
And number two is death. That means at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And
Exactly.
but so you can get up in front of people and speak. You have a voice, and you're using it,
Hmm.
and you're using it well. And it's meant a lot to me to have you on today to talk about this. And if people want to find out more, the book is called "When Love Lets Go: A Daughter's Faith Journey and Her Mother's Final Days." And you now know a little bit more of Malena's story. I would encourage you to read the book. I'd encourage you to find out more about her. Where can where can people go to? They get this book, Amazon and so forth. But is there any place else you'd like them to go to find out more about you? Your
They
IMDb
can
page.
my
So,
or Instagram for those who are on Instagram is at Malena Malena on TV, which is well, I was trying to come up with an Instagram name. I said, what could it be? And I said, everybody always calls me the newsletter or aren't you on TV? So I said, Malena on TV. That's easy to remember. And I'm still on TV. And I'm in the process too now of building a website and an ecosystem for When Love Lets Go. So be on the lookout for that and how you can get more materials and invite me. I'd love to come speak. I'd love to come help people start a book club and discussion around the book. Anything that I can do to help caregivers to understand it's okay to not be okay, but just pray for God to give you the strength that you need for the day and to deal with whatever you have to deal with for your loved one. Because keep in mind, one day you may be on the other side that you need the care. And what would you want? And what would you want that to look like for you?
I love the old hymn, strength, the great is thy faithfulness, strength for today, bright hope for tomorrow.
Yes,
And that's
yes,
what we
yes,
have.
yes.
Malena Cunningham, I thank you so much for being a part of the program today. Thank you all for taking the time to listen, and I hope that this conversation that she and I have had have been as meaningful to you as it has been to me personally. and I'm grateful for the opportunity. This is Peter Rosenberger. This is Hope for the Caregiver. We'll see you next time.